At the time of this recording, today is September 9th, 2019, which marks the 10-year anniversary of one of my favorite games of all time, the Beatles Rock Band. This day is very special to me for a variety of different reasons. For one, it's the game's release date, and then the release of the remastered CDs for all the albums, and the day that I actually won the game for free at a contest, which meant a lot to me at the time. If you couldn't tell already, I am a big Beatles fan. How big, you may ask? Well, I grew up listening to all of their albums, including the Beatles anthology, and learning how to play most of their songs on my guitar. At the entrance of my home, I have a wall full of Beatles pictures in my living room, and I have a photographic biography of the Beatles' career on my coffee table. 2 of them, in fact. There's a whole bunch of other memorabilia that I have, but I'm not gonna bore you listing all of it. Going back to the special occasions, I mentioned that I won the Beatles Rock Band during a contest on release day, which is a fun little story that I would like to tell you all now. If you don't want to hear it and just want to get to the commentary on the game itself, you can skip to this time frame right here. I remember being in high school and not doing too well academically, socially, and emotionally. So basically I was just like any other normal teenager at the time. The announcement of an actual honest-to-God Beatles video game was one of the few things that kept me going. I was already saving as much money as I could to buy the game at launch, but when I found out that I could potentially win the game for free, I basically had to beg my dad to take me to the local Best Buy on a school day where the contest was being held. I already had an enormous amount of experience playing Guitar Hero at an expert level. I never was able to beat Through the Fire and Flames though, but in any case I felt like I could take on most songs just fine. I was never the kind of kid to be competitive, motivated about anything, or be skilled enough to win anything. But this was the Beatles we were talking about, man. This was serious business to me. I wanted to try my hardest at winning this. So when my dad and I arrived at the Best Buy on launch day, September 9th, 2009, I saw a kid and his mother playing the game on display. This mother was more than happy to show off his son like a trophy over all of the different Guitar Hero tournaments that he had allegedly won, including the money he had made too. It actually reminded me a lot of those articles I read a long time ago where young kids would drop out of school just to play Guitar Hero and win tournaments for a living. Yeah, this was at a time before esports were even a thing, much less blown up to the proportions that they are now. So I'm wondering where those people are now, considering how no one ever talks about or plays any of these games anymore. I'm assuming they all just went back to school. But I digress. The mom was telling us how good her kid was, and I was pissing myself because I thought he was gonna kick my ass at the game. Whoever got the highest score at playing Day Tripper on harder difficulty would win the game, and a bundle including Paul McCartney's bass as a controller and a drum kit. Also a microphone and a bunch of fun little things like postcards and stuff like that. This kid had clearly shown up ahead of time to play a bit of the game in advance though, so I was at a clear disadvantage. I was super nervous, and to make matters worse, my dad, who has really good social skills, he for some reason convinced the person organizing the contest to have me be the first person on the list to try out the song. I was saying, okay, maybe at least I can see 1 or 2 people play the game first, and then I'll know what's going on ahead of time. Nope, I had to go first. So needless to say, I played the song like a statue, completely stiff, not bobbing to the music at all. I was playing as carefully as possible. I felt like Forrest Gump when they tell him to always keep his eye on the ball when playing ping pong. Okay, like that, but I was holding a plastic instrument instead. I was keeping my eyes on every single note passing by, not a single one passed by me. I was already playing songs on expert with my eyes closed at the time, but small mistakes can always happen, and they do happen. I also kept waggling the whammy bar faster than Michael J. Fox with Parkinson's so I could get as many extra points as possible. And also, because I already knew the song front to back, I used my star power strategically to activate it at the moment where I knew I would hit the biggest amount of notes. Before I knew it, I was done playing the song and I got 100% on it. Not a single mistake, thank God. If I remember correctly, I got around 69,000 points or so. And then, that other kid came into play. Both me and my dad were watching closely, hoping that he would screw up somewhere. And then, he did. It was only once, but that was enough to place him at around 68,900 and something points. I honestly forget what the exact number was, but I remember it being very, very close to the score that I had. My dad and I were both jumping around excited, practically celebrating our victory, even though there were still a whole ton of people that still needed to play. Oh, and that mom from earlier, she never said another word for the whole event, which was very satisfying to see. So after that, all I gotta do was sit there and wait for every single person to go and play the exact same song over and over again. I was sick of Day Tripper, man. That was hours of hearing the same song over and over again. Everybody, one by one, had to play the same song, and I had to sit there and wait. It turned into nighttime. I never wanted to hear that damn song ever again. After everyone played, nobody beat my score, and I won the full Beatles Rock Band bundle. It sounds kind of ridiculous, but I legitimately felt proud of what I accomplished that day. As I mentioned before, I had never truly won anything by using skills that I had developed on my own, and my self-esteem at the time was at an all-time low, so winning that contest gave me a lot of confidence in myself, teaching me that if I care enough about something, and I try hard enough, I can get what I want, even if there's a seasoned expert right in front of me saying, hey, you're not gonna win this. But I did. And it felt awesome. So after hearing that story, you guys can imagine that I played the hell out of this game. I explored every single corner of it, I unlocked everything, played every song on every difficulty, used all of the instruments, and sang through every single track. It was a magical experience for me. Easily my most favorite Rock Band game, and as a general music game, it's #1 for me. However, as time passed by and new games started to come out, I eventually stopped playing it and never truly went back to it until the DLC albums got released, and then when the 10-year anniversary was approaching. This anniversary leads to the primary question that inspired this video. Does this game still hold up 10 years later? In my opinion, yes, it absolutely does. Even looking at it today in 2019, the Beatles Rock Band does not feel like just another Rock Band or Guitar Hero game. There was a lot about it that was different, turning it into its own unique thing. It is less of a Rock Band game with Beatles songs in it and much more of a Beatles game featuring a Rock Band-like structure. This is why I think the naming scheme makes a whole lot more sense than other band-focused games that came out in the same year, which was Guitar Hero Metallica, Guitar Hero Van Halen, and Guitar Hero Aerosmith a year prior. All of these titles place Guitar Hero first in giant big text, and then the band the game is dedicated to has small little secondary text at the bottom. I know I'm reading off of a script, but that's just funny to me to say out loud. You can clearly see what I mean by just observing the games in action. They basically run on the same engine that Guitar Hero 3 was made in. All of the fictional Guitar Hero characters can still be played on those games as well. And a lot of those songs featured are completely different bands that represent sources of inspiration or some sort of connection with the band in question, with around 20 or so songs for the main titular bands. If I didn't know any better, I would assume that all 3 of these games were just expansion packs for Guitar Hero 3, similar to that AC/DC track pack on PS2 that you always find at the GameStop or at a Walmart for like $2 that never seems to go away for some reason. I am not trying to imply that these games are bad or anything. In fact, far from it. If anything, I highly encourage that you track down a copy of these games and play them yourself. They're actually pretty damn good. But the point that I'm trying to make is that one game definitely had more thought, confidence, trust, and love put into it than others. And you can see that by just looking at the title, for goodness sake. With this one, it is a Guitar Hero game first and an Aerosmith game second. But with this one, it is a Beatles game first and a Rock Band game second. You can see this in how it executes everything differently from the Guitar Hero games. In fact, it is a complete antithesis of those. It goes completely against the norm of what you would expect out of a game like this. And if that is not the most Beatles-ass thing to do, I don't know what is, honestly. It doesn't try to pull you in with songs from different bands connected to the Beatles, like Elvis Presley songs or whatever. The whole game is only Beatles songs. Not only that, but the disc launched with more than 40 songs on it, not including the DLC, which is already double the amount of songs that the Guitar Hero games would have for their titular bands, which usually range from 20 to 25 tracks. The game doesn't let you play as your crazy customizable characters either. Again, Beatles first, Rock Band second. You can only play as John, Paul, George, and Ringo, going through their entire musical career from their humble beginnings in the Cavern Club in Liverpool to that final concert on the rooftop. There are no guest appearances or nothing. Even in places where a guest should be there, there's no guitar solo battles against like the Rolling Stones or anything like that. No one else has any business showing up other than the Beatles themselves. You cannot transfer your older Rock Band songs to this game either, nor vice versa, just in case anybody was wondering if you could have the Beatles play Oasis songs or something. This is all Beatles all the time. It is a self-contained experience by choice, which I think was the best decision to make in the long run. People come here to see the Beatles, not anyone else. And the fact that that is exactly what you get shows a lot of confidence and respect for the band in the part of the developers. Speaking of the developers, I would like to give props to Harmonix for not getting lazy with this game at all. The Beatles Rock Band could have easily been like those Guitar Hero games. Just an expansion of Rock Band 2 called like Rock Band 2 Beatles Edition or Rock Band featuring the Beatles or something. Fortunately for us, it's not. I'm glad that we live in this timeline where things turned out to be a lot better. Harmonix went out of their way to completely redesign the Rock Band structure from the ground up, made to better fit the Beatles aesthetic, especially with the changes that occurred throughout the years. They placed a ton of references and attention to detail, to the point that even the menu sounds remind me of notes played in other Beatles songs like Getting Better. Heck, even in the loading screens before a song plays, it contains special audio recordings and outtakes of the actual Beatles chatting and talking to each other in between takes.
No, we'll just... Well, I'll just sort of...
I'd ask my friends earlier, I think. Or...
Do you want this one with the chords on? Okay. Yeah. Let's hear it. Oh, you ready? Okay. We're still trying to do the voice as well. Don't forget to wow.
And that's not all though. You can hear more of it when you beat a song, when you fail at a song, restart a song, or just let the credits roll. Even when you stay on a quiet menu option, you can very faintly hear some chattering from the studio, which gives it a strangely ominous and nostalgic feeling, almost like listening to ghosts of the past. Another thing that I appreciated from this game was the unlockables through the story mode. Yes, a music game, a Rock Band game, has a story mode. It goes through a fairly simplified and visually pleasing summary of the Beatles' career. Obviously, if this is your first time ever looking into the Beatles, then these scenes won't do anything for you. However, the vast majority of the people buying this game are Beatles fans anyway, so most people will enjoy these nonetheless. I'll say this much, the more you know about the Beatles' real-life story, the more emotionally invested you will be when playing through the simplified story in the game. I know I started to get a bit emotional towards the end. It's very difficult to explain, but this game has a really strange, how do I call it? Like a vibe to it. Like some sort of aura is exuding out of the game that makes me feel like the whole thing is some sort of dream. It feels nostalgic in a way that puts me in a trance, like a hypnotic trance when I play a song. I lose myself in it in a way that very little games are able to do to me. I don't know if I'm coming off as crazy or pretentious, but this is legitimately me trying to verbalize these strange feelings when I get to play through the story mode, or any part of the game for that matter. It makes me feel happy, but almost in a bittersweet kind of way. It's like happy and sad all at once. I guess you could just call that melancholic, but I'm not sure what to call it myself. But whatever the label may be, it is certainly unforgettable and an absolute delight to get through. Especially when after getting a certain number of points, you unlock special video files with rare Beatles footage, like outtakes from a documentary, going backstage before a concert, and just seeing the band members be their usual goofy selves, which is half of why the Beatles are so good. My personal favorite is the Christmas record that they made for the Beatles fan club. If any of you have ever wondered what it would be like to have an official Beatles podcast, this is probably what it would sound like.
Hello, this is John speaking with his voice. We're all very happy to be able to talk to you like this on this little bit of plastic. This record reaches you at the end of a really gay year for us, and it's all due to you.
Because all our homes and offices got stacks of mail last June. Ow! Well, I'm running over my time and people are telling me to stop.
Stop shouting those animals.
I'll finish now with it. Wishing everyone happy Crimble.
I'm George Harrison. Nobody else has said anything yet about our fan club secretaries, Anne Collingham and Bettina Rose. Not to mention Frida Kelly in Liverpool.
Those are all incredibly fun to watch and to listen to, with my only criticism being that they could have added more stuff to unlock. What's there is good, but I don't think they had enough. In fact, I'm pretty sure that summarizes my opinion of the game as a whole. What is there is fantastic, but they could have easily have added more. As far as rhythm games are concerned, I think it's a fairly good compliment to receive when the biggest complaint for your game is that I just want more of it. This feels like I am transitioning onto criticisms, but let's hold off on that for just a little bit longer. Let's go ahead and go through a basic overview of the game and what it has to offer before tackling the more nitty-gritty details. So for starters, we have quick play, probably the thing that you will play the most. It's just playing through all the songs in different difficulties with up to 4 people, fairly self-explanatory. It has a really nice looking menu though, with a bunch of convenient ways to organize the songs, such as in order of difficulty or chronological order of all of the albums released. There is also a mystery song button that will let you play a song at random, which is always nice when you can't decide what to play. Similar to other Rock Band games, you could set up a playlist so you could keep playing a whole chunk of Beatles songs back to back without having to go and return to the main menu all the time. In addition to the regular quick play, you also have a multiplayer focused tug of war mode and a score duel mode where you could compete with others locally and online. Now that I think about it, they really should have done score duel at that contest that I talked about instead of having everybody take their turns one by one. Oh well, the game was new at the time. It was literally on release date, so I'll just assume that no one realized that score duel was a thing. The online, by the way, was really fun. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like you can connect to the servers anymore. I tried a whole bunch of times and it simply would not let me connect, which is sad because I remember having a magical time playing online with a bunch of strangers who would end up being people that I would play the game with regularly. One big addition to this game is the use of vocal harmonies, which is a brand new addition that will continue on in future Rock Band games. So not only you could plug in 3 guitars and a drum set, but also 3 microphones for potentially 7 people to play the game with you. Or you could also have the instrument players sing along with mic stands, which is what I would always do when I first started playing the game. The gameplay is pretty self-explanatory. If you have played any of the games that I have mentioned thus far, Guitar Hero, Rock Band, whatever, then you know exactly what you're going to be getting into here. It's pretty obvious. There is nothing different other than the interface itself, which got a bit of a change to fit that 1960s Beatles-esque kind of look. It has a lot of that flower power, hippie, swirly kind of design, and I like it. It sticks out very nicely and it fits with the later parts of the game. I do say later parts specifically because that's when we get the dreamscapes, which are incredible visual segments for all of the songs recorded on Abbey Road Studios. When it comes to the earlier stuff, it's fairly basic concert venues from important parts of the Beatles' career, like the Cavern Club, Shea Stadium, Budokan. This is where the interface doesn't fit too well, since those earlier years were simple and more subdued and didn't have any of the psychedelic stuff from later on. I do enjoy the smaller details though, like hitting the notes that create little sparkles and stars as opposed to fire or just generic lights. But other than that, it's still the same Rock Band as ever, but infused with Beatles greatness. Even the colors of the buttons on the guitar got changed around just a little bit to reflect the Beatles colors, like the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band outfits. In terms of other modes, we have the story, which we already covered. We have training mode, which I pretty much never used, but I appreciated that it was there. It has a tutorial teaching you what all the buttons do, but then you have a practice mode where you could take on individual songs and break them down into segments, and even change the speed of the song. You can just keep repeating certain parts that you simply can't get a hold of, and then get better at it. This was a really good way to practice the more difficult parts of certain songs, and the same thing goes for the drum trainer, which is essentially the same thing, just practicing with the drums. As I said, I like that these modes are here, but nowadays, I don't think it'll do much with how old all of my plastic instruments are. I have a whole bunch of Guitar Hero and Rock Band controllers, and pretty much all of them don't work half the time. and some of them don't work at all. They're just decorations in my room. Even my Paul McCartney bass guitar that I used to record the footage for this video would just screw up on me out of nowhere, so sometimes I felt like I needed to slam down on the strummer so hard that I legit thought I was gonna break it. So yeah, unless you find a brand new set of controllers off of eBay or something that no one has touched, you are very likely gonna have to take out your old dust-covered controllers from your closet and play with those while struggling the entire time. So even if you try to do the hardest songs perfectly, you can guarantee that it'll be the controller doing most of the screwing up for you. Okay, moving on to the next thing. We have options, which are fairly interesting actually. You have basic sound, video, and calibration settings, the usual stuff, but you also have game settings, which change the gameplay just a little bit. You have super speed, which is, well, super speed. And then there's realistic mode, which takes the noise of the crowd during concert venues and cranks it up to super high levels, reminiscent of the actual Beatles concerts where you could barely hear the music people were screaming so hard about. Oh, and now that we're talking about the concerts, I just wanted to say that the audience members also look pretty good. I like the details made to them to look appropriate to the 1960s time frame. The girls also freaking out over the band, the cops chasing girls running towards the stage, the dudes always having to, cover their ears because the girls are screaming too loud. This is easily the greatest amount of effort ever placed onto the audience in any Rock Band or Guitar Hero game. Sure, there are some people in the background that look just terrifying, and even the Beatles themselves can look a bit robotic at times. I think I've seen C-3PO from Star Wars look more realistic than this. But they could have easily done a lot worse, or just not bothered at all. They tried to do something fun with it, which is more than what most rhythm games and concert settings can say. A lot of these music-based games tend to forget that half of the fun of going to a concert is seeing all of the people around you lose their minds to their favorite song, like they just announced a brand new character in Smash Brothers or something. So I think it's really charming to see that aspect of concerts be taken into account, especially with an option that makes the audience even louder. And finally, there's performance mode, where it essentially just gets rid of the interface so you can get a full view of the awesome visuals. And I think it's worth it for you to check out at least once. I do recommend combining this feature with only the microphone and no fail mode turned on, so you can see all of the songs play like it's a music video with no penalties at all. And that, in a nutshell, is the options menu. Next up is extras, and there's nothing extra about it. There's literally nothing to it. You got leaderboards, trophies, the credits, and a thing to check your online invites. But as I said, the servers are dead, so that menu button is just taking up space and is completely useless. And speaking of useless, we have the music store, where you could download all the DLC back when it existed. Unfortunately, this is another menu option that just does nothing because Harmonix stopped selling the DLC since May 5th of 2016, due to the license on all of those albums expiring. It's a real shame. And that's also probably why they never put out more DLC beyond the 3 albums and All You Need Is Love as a single. The licenses were probably super expensive, and considering how this game did not sell super well, at least compared to other games in the Rock Band series, the expenses probably were not worth it. Not only that, but the United States was going through an economic recession at the time, and this was also the year where people were starting to show signs of getting tired of the whole plastic instrument music game genre. It seemed to me that Guitar Hero 3 and Rock Band 2 was the highest peak of popularity for them, but everything beyond that was met with people getting burnt out and just generally stopped caring. In other words, the greatest game ever was released at probably the worst possible time, right when people were starting to feel the fatigue. If the Beatles Rock Band had released, I don't know, like about a year earlier and under different circumstances, it very likely would have sold a ton more, and we could have even gotten more DLC albums than what we got currently, since higher sales would obviously encourage more DLC to be made, but oh well, we gotta deal with what we got. And what we got is still pretty damn good, all things considered, even after all of these years. So I did say that the game holds up pretty well. It has some interesting options to play around with, some fantastic visuals that are still impressive today, and of course the music is still to die for. However, it is in the song list where I start to warm up my engines for the criticisms that I have for this game. At the end of the day, they are fairly minor complaints, but I still wanted to mention them. Previously, I summarized the entire game as, it's great, but I want more. The game launched with 45 songs, which is pretty damn good considering how other band-focused games got half that amount. And of course, the DLC made that number slightly bigger, but even with the DLC, I still find that the track list is simply way too short. And it makes me wonder what the developers were thinking when deciding what songs would make it into the game or not. There are some obvious and iconic songs like Hey Jude, Let It Be, Eleanor Rigby, She Loves You, and a bunch more that would obviously be in the game, right? Well, no. None of the songs that I just mentioned exist in this game. Help? Nope, that's not in there. That is a massive shame. To me, those songs seem like a complete no-brainer. Those would be the first songs that I would ever think of. I never thought there would ever be a Beatles game without them, but they did it. That's how it went down. My assumption to why this is the case is probably the same as why we didn't get more DLC. Licensing issues. Maybe it was too expensive, or they wanted all 4 Beatles to get enough screen time or something to make it fair. I have no idea. But I can definitely say that Harmonix completely dropped the ball. Like enormously in choosing all the songs, which isn't to say that the current song list is bad by any stretch of the imagination. Every song here is a song that I love, but you can't deny that there are some glaring holes that needed to be filled here. I remember when I played this game with my dad a long time ago, and the first thing that he asked me was, "Can I sing Eleanor Rigby?" which is his favorite Beatles song, and I had to awkwardly say no because the song didn't exist in the game at all. Okay, so in the game's defense, to be completely fair, I think this complaint would have been inevitable no matter what, because no matter how many songs they include, if it's not the entire library of songs, there will always be the one guy that is going to ask for his own personal favorite that is not going to be in it. It's kind of like seeing so many characters in Super Smash Bros., but then there's the one guy that's like, well, if this character could be in the game, then why not this other one? Well, there's probably a bunch of licensing and legal stuff behind the scenes that we don't know about. But we still got a ton of good characters, and Sakurai tried his best, damn it. He works really hard. Be grateful. I would say that the same thing applies with this game. They could have added more, but it's very likely that the licensing was too expensive and the kind of okay sales prevented more songs from making it in. I'm sure the developers would have added every single Beatles song if they could, but of course, reality is always different. Looking at it on the bright side of things, I wasn't aware of every single Beatles song at the time. I knew about all of these super famous and iconic ones, but there are some smaller songs that completely flew under my radar at that time. Songs such as And Your Bird Can Sing, If I Needed Someone, Birthday, Good Morning, She's Leaving Home, the original Within You Without You, the official version of While My Guitar Gently Weeps, as opposed to the acoustic version from the Love album that I absolutely fell in love with, because, fun fact, the Love album was the very first Beatles song that I ever listened to from beginning to end. So there were a lot of songs that I listened for the very first time on that album as opposed to the original. So yeah, I did miss out on a bunch of songs from the original albums. All of these are tracks that I had never listened to before playing this game. So as far as I was concerned, it was like living in a world where the Beatles somehow came back together and created a bunch of brand new songs. It was an amazing feeling to start up a song and then realize, oh my god, I don't know this one. It's like I'm listening to a lost album that was somehow unearthed from the archives. I know that most of you will not feel this way. I know that most of you probably already know every single Beatles song by heart, but I can only speak to my own experience, especially back then, 10 years ago. I can say that those particular moments made my experience 100 times more enjoyable. In addition to discovering new songs, even the songs that I knew about already were different in some way. For anybody that doesn't know, a ton of the Beatles catalog features songs that end on a fade out, so there's no real ending to them. Harmonix remedied that by creating definitive endings to the songs that originally didn't have them, which I found very enjoyable to discover. There are some songs that still fade out, Come Together still fades out, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds fades out. There's a couple there, like a handful of songs that were not changed at all, but most of them have a brand new ending, which was exciting and very fun for me to discover. I almost would have liked an official album where we could listen to these alternative versions on the go, but that unfortunately never happened. You would have to rip the audio straight out of the game if you want that to happen. There were some people that were upset by this, with one big example being the song Her Majesty. If you don't know, Her Majesty is the final song in the Beatles' final album, Abbey Road. It's an incredibly short 23-second song in which the final note is completely missing from the official album. It just kind of ends very abruptly. A lot of people like it the way that it is, so when the video game decided to add that note back in, people didn't like it. In my personal opinion, I don't care one way or the other. I love both versions. In fact, I like the newer version with the note added in there because it just gives me a feeling of closure after going through the story and thinking about the anthology and the story of the Beatles, and just kind of having that final note added in there and seeing Paul McCartney alone in the studio, you know, with none of the other Beatles there. I don't know. It's just like strangely sad and weird, and I don't know, it's just a strange feeling of closure that I get. It's just kind of strangely emotional. I just like to see it added in there. If there's anything else in terms of criticism, it will probably be related to the difficulty. Out of all of the Guitar Hero and Rock Band games I have ever played, the Beatles Rock Band is without a doubt the easiest one to beat. This is more about enjoying the music and the trippy visuals instead of challenging yourself and breaking your fingers with super hard guitar solos. This isn't to say that there aren't any difficult ones. You can definitely get your ass kicked in certain songs. That drum solo during the end is impossible for me. And then trying to get certain trophies that basically ask you to play everything perfectly, so some of those trophies are pretty crazy. When it comes to difficulty in games, I have two streams of thought. If a game is hard, I just want to beat it. If a game is easy, I want to be perfect at it. Since most of the songs were not that challenging, I ended up creating a new challenge for myself in which I would try to be as perfect as I possibly could at every song with every instrument. And yes, that does include the microphone. Usually in other games like Guitar Hero, you get these really tough songs and I'm like, oh man, I just barely made it through this song. I got 3 stars, but I don't care. I beat it and that's all that matters. I don't need to prove myself to anyone. I did what was required of me to move forward, and that's that. But when I played the Beatles Rock Band, I am agonizing over the fact that I didn't get the golden 5 stars and just got the regular 5 stars. Oh, what a tragedy. With that said, I would like to point out that the difficulty curve is all over the place. Since the story mode follows the chronological order of the songs as they were released, as opposed to easiest to hardest, you will find yourself barely playing the guitar in one song, but then getting blisters on your fingers from playing so fast in the next one. This is okay, and I was fully expecting this, by the way, but it is a little bit jarring when playing other music games where the order doesn't really matter, so they just front load all of the easy songs first and then have you working your way to more challenging songs. That's usually how it goes. So to see this be done differently, yeah, I mean, it does kind of take you for a ride a little bit. I said it before and I will say it again. The Beatles Rock Band is not about being challenging. It is about creating a love letter to one of the greatest bands of all time by visually representing their songs in one of the most visually impressive feats that I have ever seen in any music game. My personal favorites are the psychedelic acid trips that you get from playing songs such as Within You Without You and Tomorrow Never Knows remix from the Love album. You also have For the Benefit of Mr. Kite, I Am the Walrus, and Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. All of these songs have a visual accompaniment that fits the song perfectly. I think the whole idea of dreamscapes is a genius idea, far better than just seeing the Beatles record their songs in the studio with no special effects. I mean, there is a little bit of that, but there's always an impressive transition into the dreamscapes that never feels jarring, or they just blindside me with some incredible visuals while they're still within the studio. It just looks incredible. If you want to know what I mean, go on YouTube and look up the Come Together song played in the game, and it is just wonderful. I have no idea why other music games have not rolled with this idea. It seems like something that would become a trendy thing that other rhythm games would just steal, like the combat system from Batman Arkham Asylum, or those colorful backgrounds from Mother 2 and Mother 3. Sure, there have been future Rock Band games like Rock Band 3 that have tried to make more fancy visuals similar to the Dreamscapes, but they never really worked for me. The problem with those is that they are not customized to the specific song being played. It's just trippy special effects for the sake of having them. With the Beatles Rock Band, every single song has been lovingly crafted to be its own unique experience. It doesn't have any generic effects that you could just apply to any song. Everything you see is made to enhance the one specific song that is being played. In addition to the special effects, we also have the Beatles themselves. As you play through their entire musical career, you can witness them aging, growing facial hair, and wearing a variety of different outfits. Some of them are accurate to the time that the songs were recorded, while other costumes are more referential to Beatles-related material, such as the I Am the Walrus costumes from Magical Mystery Tour, the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album cover, and the outfits the Beatles wear in the animated Yellow Submarine movie, which is one of my favorite animated movies of all time, by the way. You also have a recreation of their appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show, and even a fun recreation of previous music videos the Beatles made, like Hello Goodbye and Hey Bulldog. There isn't a single thing in this game that isn't some sort of reference or homage to what the Beatles actually did in real life. Sometimes you will even find pictures in the game itself that prove it. There are some tiny historical inconsistencies, such as certain band members showing up in songs where they took no part in recording at all. There are some songs where only George Harrison was involved, for example, but we still see all four Beatles playing together. Or perhaps another song where Ringo didn't actually play the drums at all, but he shows up playing back in the USSR on drums anyway. This of course is due to the drama and the fighting that was happening within the band at the time, but the game is obviously not going to drudge all of that up here, and I don't think that is necessary to mention either. Maybe that's exactly why I feel so melancholic about this game whenever I play it, because I am well aware of all the drama that was happening behind the scenes, including the bittersweet way that the band went out at the end. But this game was not made to remind you of the bad times. It's here to allow you to relive and enjoy the good times. And I think this game delivers on that promise and then some. In conclusion, I think the Beatles Rock Band, even after 10 years, is still a wonderful video game, and one of the greatest music games that I have ever played. I might go as far as to say that it's my favorite licensed-based thing ever. Obviously, I wear my Beatles bias on my sleeve, so do keep that in mind. But I honestly have yet to see any other video game represent a famous band in the same level of love and respect that they have demonstrated here. This is a delightful compilation of the Beatles' greatest hits, along with spectacular visual aids for every song that till this day are still unrivaled in their quality and uniqueness. This game was released on PS3, Xbox 360, and the Nintendo Wii. Unfortunately, the game has never been re-released again on more modern platforms, and because of all the licensing issues that I mentioned before, it is very likely that we will never see a remaster or some sort of port of the game ever again. If I was living in an ideal world where I could have what I wanted, I would have a second Beatles game released for the modern platforms. Not a port, something entirely new. I would have all of the current songs and a ton of new songs that were missing from the original, this time with the express purpose of putting the entire Beatles catalog in video game form. And believe me, even if you don't put all of them in there, there's still a lot more iconic songs that they could have had in the game. I would also add a ton of new unlockables, more trophies, more, footage of the Beatles being silly, interviews, what have you, trophies, challenges to fit the newer songs being added, more dreamscapes, and obviously a graphical upgrade that would make the game look even better than it does now. And hell, I might even take it a step further than that and start adding songs and albums from their individual solo careers. Put Imagine on there, man, who cares? All Things Must Pass, sure, why not? Band on the Run, do it. Go ahead. Most of those tracks already sound like Beatles songs anyway. Add in Free as a Bird and Real Love. You can really expand on the story mode by going even further into the future by showing the older Beatles playing their greatest hits from playing on their own, with maybe the anthology reunion happening at the end. I know that I'm only dreaming, but if I could have it my way and bring the Beatles back into the video game world, that's what I would do. The Beatles Rock Band 2. Or hell, I would even take away the rock band name on it and just call it The Beatles or something, I don't know. But for now, all I can do is to be thankful that a game like this was even possible and enjoy what I have. Big shoutouts to George Harrison's son, Danny Harrison, for pitching the idea of the game in the first place, by the way. And even if we never get a new Beatles game ever again, I will always keep this game near and dear to my heart. Thinking about when I won that contest that boosted my confidence at my lowest point in my life, thinking about all those times that I completely lost myself in the music and visuals, seeing all the imagination and beauty from the studio start leaking into the real world as the Beatles rock out on the rooftop one final time, summoning a giant blue Ganesha elephant out of nowhere, stomping across Liverpool and erecting giant flowers in the greatest massacre and tragedy the Liverpool has ever seen. Some folks say that blue elephant is still stomping around all across the universe till this very day. Remembering how I would spend time with my online friends doing the entire Abbey Road medley together before going to bed. And on top of that, having the remastered CDs to enjoy the music after the fact, because they came out on the same day that the game did. Nowadays, I just use Google Play Music instead of CDs, but you know what I mean. Even as a child that grew up during the mid-90s forward, the Beatles have accompanied me throughout my entire life and mean the world to me. Even if everyone else is sick of playing with their plastic instruments, I honestly never got tired of coming back to the Beatles rock band. It's an experience that stuck with me and will continue to stick with me in my memory for as long as I have a memory. The greatest tribute ever made to one of the greatest rock bands of all time. And just like the Beatles' music, this video game will definitely withstand the test of time for another 10 years to come.